Brendan Dassey trial transcript, day 5. All right, reconvened at 8:36 a.m. Jurors not present. The court. Good morning, counsel. I'm going to call the case. It's 06CF88, State of Wisconsin versus Brendan Dassey. Appearances, please. Attorney Fallon. Good morning, Your Honor. May it please the court, the state continues in its appearance of special prosecutors Ken Kratz, Tom Fallon, and Norm Gahn. Attorney Freeman. Attorney Mark Freeman appears with Ray Edelstein. The defendant appears in person. The court. The court is going to go on the record before the jury, before the jury comes in, to note that prior to coming in here, counsel and I have had a discussion. I informed them that one of the jurors was having some health-related issues. After the discussion, she is going to be released. So, counsel, is that correct? Attorney Fallon. Yes, Judge, that's our understanding, and we would agree with the court's assessment to have her excused. The court. Defense? Attorney Freeman. That's correct. The court. All right, bring the jury in. Attorney Fallon. Judge, are you going to read the instruction about the video as well? The court. I am. Attorney Fallon. Okay. The court. Once we get to it. Jurors in at 8:39 a.m. The court. All right. Be seated. Is prosecution ready to proceed? Attorney Fallon. Yes. We would ask that the Investigator Wiegert retake the stand. Mark Wiegert, called as a witness herein, having been first duly sworn, was examined and testified as follows. By Attorney Fallon. Investigator Wiegert, I believe we left off yesterday afternoon regarding your intended interview of the defendant on February 27. Would you, first of all, tell us of your plans to interview the defendant on that day? Yes, myself and Agent Fossbender had went to the Mishicot school system, and that's where we met with Mr. Dassey that day. All right, and you gestured to Mr. Dassey. Just officially and for the record, is the Brendan Dassey that you interviewed on that day and subsequent days present in court today? He is. He's seated at to the left, my left of his attorney. He's wearing a blue shirt and glasses. Very well. Attorney Fallon, the record should again reflect that the witness has identified the defendant. The court. It will so reflect. Attorney Fallon, thank you. About what time did you arrive at the Mishicot High School on that day, February 27? I believe it was about 12:30 or so in the afternoon when we first got to the school. Where did you meet with Mr. Dassey, the defendant? We met with Mr. Dassey in a conference room just off of where the office for I believe it's the high school, would be located. Who else was present? Myself and Mr. Fossbender. Did you then commence an interview of Mr. Dassey that day? We did. We did about a little over an hour interview with Mr. Dassey at the school. All right, and at the conclusion, well, first of all, tell us, was that interview at all memorialized in any fashion? We did an audio tape. Unfortunately, all we had was one of the old cassette recorders, and we had that sitting on a table between us, and it didn't pick up very well. The audio was very poor. All right, at the conclusion of the interview, what did you do? After the interview, we had contacted District Attorney Kratz to inform him of what we had learned from that interview. Mr. Kratz requested that we memorialize this interview in a better fashion. So at that point, we decided we made arrangements to go to Two Rivers Police Department, where there would be a videotaped interview room. So that's what we did. All right, what arrangements did you make in advance to conduct a videotaped interview? We actually contacted Brendan's mother and informed her what we wanted to do. And how did she respond? Barb actually responded to the school at that time, and she rode with myself, Agent Fossbender, and Brendan to Two Rivers Police Department, all in the same car. We gave her a ride there. And tell us approximately what time did you interview the defendant at Two Rivers Police Department? It was somewhere between 3:20 and 3:30 in the afternoon when we started the interview at Two Rivers Police Department. And where was the defendant's mother, Barb Yonda, at that time? We had spoke to Barb prior to doing the interview and indicated she had every right to be in the interview if she wished to be in, and that time she declined. She waited in an outer waiting area of the police department while we conducted the interview. All right, and approximately how long did you speak with Mr. Dassey this afternoon? I believe it was less than an hour that we did that interview. All right, at the conclusion of the interview, what was done between you and Special Agent Fossbender? Obviously, we discussed the interview and discussed what we had learned in the interview. All right, after meeting and interviewing Mr. Dassey on this day, February 27, what was your thinking? Well, at that time, that's the first time Brendan places himself at the crime scene, is during that interview. Places himself at the fire. So we decided that we needed to interview everybody else that lived on that property, and we needed to do that right away to see what other people knew. We didn't know if other people knew about this at that point or not, so we decided that we needed to conduct a lot of interviews. Did you have any feeling as to whether or not the defendant had told you everything that he knew at that time? My feeling was no, he didn't. That he knew more because every time we would talk to him, he'd give you a little bit more, give you a little bit more. And again, that's the first time he placed himself basically on that crime scene. All right, now after those two interviews that particular day, did you think that he was a suspect at that particular point? No, again, in my thinking at that point, he's still a witness, a witness to something horrific. He tells us that he sees body parts in a fire. I mean, so we're thinking he is a witness to something at that point. All right. Now, earlier we heard from Special Agent Fossbender that the defendant and his mother were put up at the Fox Hills Hotel in Mishicot. How did that come to pass? Well, there are two reasons that we decided to do that night. The first reason, number one, first and foremost in any law enforcement's mind, is safety. I mean, our job is to protect people. That's the bottom line. Because of the information he told us, if there was somebody else that lived out there that would have found out and may have also been involved, we were worried for his safety, that they would somehow get to him and maybe harm him. So we thought to be on the safe side, we needed to put him somewhere off of that property. Number two, as any law enforcement officer knows, integrity in an investigation is very important, and it can be tainted very easily by somebody going back and saying, this is what I told the cops, cover this up, do this, and we didn't want that to happen. We didn't want Brendan or his mother, for that matter, going back and telling anybody else on that property what they told us for fear of tainting that investigation. So there were two reasons that we did that. All right. Now, Special Agent Fossbender told us about an interview he had with the defendant and his mother later that evening, the 27th. Did you and he discuss the results of his interview that evening? We did. Agent Fossbender informed me that he had learned from another family member that Mr. Dassey might have had more information about that, and also that there were some pants that maybe had some bleach stains on it. Agent Fossbender informed me that he went back to Mr. Dassey and his mother later on the 27th that evening and asked Mr. Dassey about the pants. And that's the first time Mr. Dassey, Brendan, ever told us about stains on his pants, cleaning up the garage floor. So now he puts himself further into it, puts himself in that garage later on that night. All right. So are you saying that in either one of the previous interviews that day, he never mentioned anything about bleach or cleaning up in the garage or any of that? No, we never knew anything about that until Agent Fossbender learned it and went back and talked to Brendan later that night on the 27th. That's when we learned it. As a result of that information, what did you decide to do? Well, obviously, when you keep learning little bits and pieces, Brendan keeps telling us a little bit more here, a little bit more there. We realized it could possibly be either saw more, knew more, something. We need to make arrangements to go back and talk to him again. That was obvious. Now, during these interviews on the 27th, did he admit any involvement in any part, any of this? No, basically he was telling us he was a witness. All right, so then did you make arrangements to re-interview the defendant? We did, yes. And tell us about the preparation of those plans. That would take us to March 1. At that point, we contacted Brendan's mother again, told her that we would like to take Brendan to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department so we could do a videotaped interview of Brendan to see what else he maybe had known, see what else maybe he saw. It's obvious that he knew more than he was telling us. So at that point, we did again talk to his mother, told her what we wanted to do, and she gave us permission to do that. And Brendan agreed also, and Brendan went with us to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department. All right, and then did you proceed to interview Brendan Dassey on March 1? We did, yes. And was that interview memorialized in any capacity? That interview was videotaped. All right, now before we present the results of that interview, I'd like to talk to you a little bit first about some of the interview techniques that you employed during the course of your interrogation of the defendant. Sure. During the interview on March 1, did you and Special Agent Fossbender employ any deception during the course of your interviewing him? Absolutely, yes. All right, and tell us why. Well, one of the reasons that we say things that may not be true or use deceptive measures is to see how suggestible he is. I mean, if I would say something that's not true and he agrees with everything I say that's not true, obviously that's a problem. So we use techniques like that to see if he'll resist that. And in fact, he did. He would bring up certain things that we knew not to be true, and he would say that that's not true. It's not true. He'd stick to that. So yeah, it's very important, in my opinion and my experience as doing interviews, you do have to do that. Absolutely. Do you also engage in a technique on information that you suspect to be true, but may not know it true, to see if the person you're interviewing will tell you anything about it? Sure. I mean, it works both ways. I mean, you may not know. You may, again, like you said, you may suspect something and you may say that, and he may, yeah, that's true, and that. Again, that happens. It goes both ways. All right. Now, what other interview techniques were employed during your questioning of the defendant on March 1? We would say things like, you're going to hear on the tape that we already know, and they refer to it as having superior knowledge. And we used that technique in that interview as well. All right, and tell us a little bit about that technique. I mean, what is this superior knowledge? Anybody you interview, no matter what type of incident it is, what type of crime it is, it's against your self-preservation instincts. If you're involved in something, to come out and admit to it, nobody likes to admit to things. I've been doing interviews a long time, and very seldom does somebody come out on the first time you talk with them and admit things. So when you use the quote-unquote superior knowledge thing, it implies to them that you know more, that you can't fool me. We know all about it. You might as well just tell us, and that's the reason you use those types of things. In your experience as an investigator, how often has someone immediately acknowledged their involvement in an offense when you sit down and begin to question them? Almost never. Is it unusual at all for people to minimize their involvement in offenses in the initial interview? No, and if you look at interviews, and again, you take almost any crime from a burglary, sexual assault to a homicide, it's normal that people will minimize. Try to, yeah, I did a little bit, but I really didn't do it all. Things like that. And it equates to peeling an onion back. You take those layers off, those defensive layers of people, and that's what you do in interviews. That's what we do. And were there any other interview techniques employed during the questioning of the defendant that day? Yeah, we would get friendly with him. We would tell them that, you know, it's okay. Things are okay. Because you don't want somebody upset. You don't want somebody afraid of you. You want to be, you know, different officers use different techniques. But I found the best way for anybody is going to be you try to befriend them. You be nice to them. I'm not a get in your face type interviewer. Is that any common technique that you employ? Absolutely, yes. All right. Prior to questioning the defendant, did you advise him of his constitutional rights? Yes, he was read his Miranda rights from our rights form, our warning and waiver of rights form. Exhibit number 206, marked for identification. You've been handed an exhibit. Tell us what that is. It's the Calumet County Sheriff's Department warning and waiver of rights form. What is our exhibit number on that form? 206. All right, and tell us a little bit about that form if you would. The Miranda rights are, you've probably all seen it on TV if you watch any cops shows. The right to remain silent, things like that. It was just a form that we use that spells it all out. The bottom two questions indicate, do you know and understand each of these rights that I've explained to you? And it's either a yes or no. And understanding these rights, do you wish to make a statement? And it's either a yes or a no. All right, now I also note that from my previous examination of the form, there's some writing on that form, some handwriting as opposed to the printed form. Yes, tell us about that. What I do when I read the rights to people, I check them all off, first of all, to make sure I've covered them all, and then I have the person initial them. Take a look at what I read to them, and I have them initial them, which I did in this case. I also do that for the part of the waiver where I ask them if they understand these rights and ask them if they want to speak with me. Whether they say yes or no, I have them initial them to show that they have at least looked at this form and read them. And then there's a place for the person I'm interviewing to sign, and there's a place where I sign as a witness on the bottom. All right, now in terms of presenting that information to the defendant, did you read the form to him or did he read it himself? I read the form to him, and again I showed him the form and have him initial what I read. All right, at any point did he show any confusion or misunderstanding of the information on the form? No, not at all. Did he show any hesitancy about his willingness to speak with you and Agent Fossbender on March 1? No. All right. At any point, did you promise him any inducements in order to get him to speak with you that day? No. All right. And on March 1, who else was present or around for this interview? Again, myself and Agent Fossbender conducted the interview. Brendan's mother had presented herself at the Sheriff's Department sometime later during that interview.